Hi everybody, Stephanie here, and I'm really excited to share with you today 5 presser feet that I use with my Viking Husqvarna machine in order to make my sewing projects as professional as possible. I started using specialized presser feet when I was a senior in design school, and I had no idea at the time that there was this whole world of presser feet that could make my sewing and my life so much easier. When I got my brand new Viking Husqvarna Epic 980Q machine, I made sure that I invested in several presser feet that will make my life so much easier. Now that I have a machine that's professional grade, I wanted to make sure that I had all of the attachments to make my designs as professional as well. Before I share with you those 5 pivotal presser feet attachments, please make sure you hit subscribe below and click thumbs up so that other people can find these videos. Also, be sure to click in the description area below for links as to where you can buy these attachments. Let's get started. One of the first presser feet I ever bought was an invisible zipper foot. I actually bought it for my Viking Husqvarna machine that was a Platinum series. And this same exact foot, 10 years later, still works with my Epic 980Q. I use it on almost every project, and you can see it has 2 grooves underneath, which allow you to place the zipper teeth on the side, and it guides the needle to get as close to the zipper as possible so that you don't have to see any zipper when you're putting in a hidden zipper into your clothing. I'll show you how. So in order to use it, just take your needle thread, the top one, place it through the hole, pull it through, and then put it onto your machine. I've pinned the left side of my invisible zipper along the left side of the garment, right sides together. So you can see when you flip it over, you really shouldn't see any part of the zipper. Now I'm going to take the left side of the zipper and place it under the left groove. I'm just going to pull it back slightly and then lower my presser foot onto that groove. And to start sewing, I'm just going to make sure that I make a little bit of a back stitch to tie it off. And you'll notice how easily the machine glides over that left-hand zipper without catching any of the zipper teeth. You finish off by just sewing as close as you can to the zipper pull. Now you can see how perfect that stitch is. It kind of stitches right in the ditch. And then let's pull the zipper, and you can see how great and easy that works. Now we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. So you want to make sure the top is lined up properly in the exact spot it's lined up on the other side. And then again, place the right side of the zipper under the right side, the right groove of the zipper foot. And remember, as you sew, pull back with your finger that zipper teeth groove just a little bit so that the needle can easily catch the inside. And then once you finish the other side, it's a good idea to just zip up your zipper and make sure you like the way it turned out. You can't see it at all. And then what we do is we flip it inside out, and you're going to switch your presser foot back to either a regular zipper foot or whatever you have that will allow you to get as close as possible to the zipper seam there and continue to sew the seam. I'm going to use the regular zipper foot E and put it along the right hand side. Then I'm going to start at the bottom here and sew these 2 fabrics together. I'm going to sew that seam just up to the seam line right there. So getting as close as possible, and then knotting it, trimming the threads, and then let's flip it over and see. And of course we have to trim all of the insides here. But what you have is a perfect seam with an invisible zipper hidden in there. And lastly, what you would need to finish off the seam is to trim all of these pieces, which I have so many. Trim off the inside. I did not create a pattern for my ruffle, so I have lots of extra material here, and I can just trim it all up. Then what I'm going to do is actually iron this waistband and hand sew the waistband to fold over the top of the invisible zipper, and hand sew it, probably finish off that raw edge as well, just so I have everything perfect from the inside out. And then I'll repeat it on both sides. And that's it. I use a piping foot so often that I actually have 2 versions. So I have a clear version that I use on my regular Husqvarna Epic 980Q, and you can see it has a groove on the left-hand side underneath where the piping will go, and that little channel keeps everything nice and close so that the needle sews right to the right-hand side of it. I also have a piping foot for my Husqvarna S25. It is the same thing. It has a groove underneath it that guides the piping, and then when you use it with a serger or overlock machine, it will sew the piping in place and overlock the seam at the same time. So I actually use both depending on what kind of a seam I'm doing. I'll show you how I use the clear piping foot with my regular sewing machine. So I just pop it into place just like I would any foot. It's very easy. Got my threads around. I'm actually sewing part of a dress today, and I've got a very thin piping here. You can do various sizes, but this very thin one will work. It's got a nice stripe. And then I'm gonna lay it on the inside between the two right sides of the fabric. I sew with a 1/2 inch all the time, so I tend to be pretty good at eyeballing it. But what I'm gonna do is just put a few pins in here to start, just so I can keep the piping facing in, as you see, secure between the 2 layers of fabric. Then I'm going to take my 2 layers of fabric with the piping and place it so that the piping is directly underneath the groove. And of course, the more pins you decide to use here, the better, but I don't need to use too many pins because of the piping foot, which is why it's so wonderful. And then we're just going to start sewing. I don't need to, for this seam, I don't need to backstitch, but of course you can. And then just keep going. The piping foot guides the needle so perfectly that the final result is so professional and pristine. You can see the piping is put in there evenly across the entire panel, and I barely had to pin or really do anything for it. And this is a very, very tiny piping. If you were to use a normal size piping that comes packaged at your local craft store, it would be even bigger, and it'd be even more perfect. So I absolutely love this. Another presser foot that I can't live without is my gathering foot. This one has a kind of like a dual level where it gathers up the fabric underneath, and then you can also place another layer of fabric on the top here if you want to sew 2 layers together at once. I'm going to show you how to use it just for gathering. So I take my top thread and place it through the little hole and then secure it into the machine. Then I set my machine to a large stitch. I'm going to use a 5.0 and just start to sew. I do want to make sure that I have nice long tails from the top and bottom thread so that I can tie them off when I'm done sewing the stitch. So I'm just going to lower my presser foot and sew. You can see it's sewing a perfectly even gather for me, which makes it so easy. I can then attach this into any seam I want. And you can also buy attachments for gathering feet for your overlock or serger machines as well that then finish the edge at the same time. I currently don't have one of those, but it's on my wish list. Another presser foot that I use really often is the narrow hem foot. It's a little tricky to see, but it has a kind of a little curly Q attachment that flips over the fabric as you sew. It's really good with light to mid-weight wovens. And then you can see it kind of feeds it through this channel. So I'm going to show you how I use this presser foot. So again, it's very easy to attach, just like all the other presser feet. Slide it in and then pull your thread under and behind. I'm going to use this piece of fabric that's actually part of a dress that I'm working on, and it's going to have a narrow hem. I haven't ironed it at all, which typically you would have to do for any kind of hem, but what I'm going to do is kind of finger fold it one skinny level, and then the machine is going to fold it over one more level. So I'll show you what that looks like. I'm starting off by creating just a little thin finger fold here, about 1/4 inch, and then I take it and wrap it up and around and over the folding mechanism. And then I'm going to lower my presser foot. So I didn't get quite to the end, but I can go back and get that end later. And then you see I'm basically holding out that slight fold a few inches out from where I'm about to sew. And then you kind of fold it over to get it started, and then just start sewing. This is a very thin and delicate hem, which is great for lightweight fabrics. So I love it when I want something that's just really even and nice and I don't have to spend too much time ironing kind of, wiggly jiggly slimy fabrics. If you ever feel like the fabric is getting away from you, put the needle into the fabric, raise the presser foot, redo your finger fold, and then press it back over again. Again, it looks like a little trickier, but it saves you so much time instead of having to iron and fold 2 steps later. So when you're done, you can see on the needle side, you have a perfectly folded hem. And on the bobbin side, it's perfectly even, rolled, and nice and even the whole way. So this is just a really, really nice tool to get very professional looking fold. It saves time. Obviously, you would probably want to use a more matching thread than I use, but for the sake of showing you how beautiful this can come out. The last presser foot that I use to make my seams look professional is the adjustable bias binder. This one is great for package bias bindings as it's adjustable between 1/4 of an inch, 1/2 inch, and 3/4, and anything really in between. Or you can of course make your own and iron it. What's great about this, regardless of whether you make your own binding or packaged, is that it keeps a very straight line, ensuring that you catch both sides of the binding so that you can sew it in one quick seam instead of 2, or even taking out the step of pinning. On the foot, you'll see there's a dial here that you just turn right or left in order to change the width of the piping that you're using. So I'm going to use 1/2 inch packaged. So I'm going to set it right up to 1/2 inch. So with all bias binding, you should have a shorter side and a longer side. And I like to sew just as close to the edge as possible on the shorter side, ensuring that I catch the longer side in the back. So just to show you here, before I insert it in the machine, you can see what that looks like with the bias binding tucked in the top and the bottom sections of the presser foot. And then you'll attach your fabric. You'll just slide it right in that middle portion. So let's go do that in the machine. In order to get started, I find it best to take your bias binding and tuck it in before you clip it onto the machine. So I have it tucked in, then clip it onto your machine, wrap your thread underneath, and you can pull your binding back if you want, and then take the fabric that you're going to use, whether it's 1 layer or 2 layers, and slide it into the little groove right there. So you can see your binding is wrapping around the fabric. You can play with where you want your machine needle to be in order to get the desired outcome that you like. I like it to be all the way to the edge if possible, making sure that it catches the back edge underneath. So I'm gonna get started. Just lower my presser foot and sew. And once you're done, you can see what a nice clean line it has on one side, and it's caught the back side as well. So it's up to you. Often people like to use a zigzag stitch when they're sewing on bias binding. I prefer a straight stitch so it's more hidden, but you can also you can use decorative stitches and have more fun. And this binder attachment really just makes it very easy to create a straight, simple line. Thank you so much for following along today as I share with you the 5 presser feet that I use most often with my Viking Epic 980Q machine. I use these 5 presser feet so often in order to help me create the designs that I love and to make my life so much easier. So I really hope they helped you too.